started. Time ran away. I didn't realize it was 6. Please find your seats. There's plenty of seats. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 26, 2025 Special City Council Workshop meeting. I'm calling it to order. I will remind everyone this City Council workshop is intended to educate, to raise awareness, to bring transparency to the information we as a council, the city, and the agencies that will be presenting tonight has access to. We will also take public comment after each of the presentations, so everybody has an opportunity to ask questions or comment or share their point of view. However, your comments and questions must be related to the agenda topics. Because it's a special city council meeting per the Brown Act, we cannot accept general public comment. When we will be able to provide that will be at our next city council meeting, April 2nd, which happens to be my birthday. So, I want to welcome our presenters. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time to help our community become more educated. So with that, we're going to turn it over to City Clerk Kelly to call the roll.
Councilmember McKay.
McKay, present.
Councilmember Leyva Gonzalez.
Leyva Gonzalez, present.
Councilmember Fisher.
Fisher, present.
Mayor Pro Tem Seabury.
Seabury, present.
And Mayor Aguirre.
Present. Next, I'd like to, do we have any communications from city staff? No communications from city staff. Next, we're going to go straight into the presentations. First, we have a presentation by County of San Diego Health and Human Services Agency on the CASPER survey. I'd like to invite Mark Beatty, Assistant Medical Director with the County of San Diego Health and Human Services Department, to give the presentation. Please proceed, Mr. Beatty.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mark Beatty from the County of San Diego. I'll be talking about the Community Assessment for Public Health Emergency Response that was conducted for the Tijuana River sewage emergency. Next slide. Is there a slide? Great, thank you. Awesome. Okay. So I will cover the results of the CASPER, what the County of San Diego's plan of action was with the results, and some closing and summary comments. This is just a quick slide that I'll come back to, but just a reminder that it takes a community, a village really, to deal with a crisis like this. The goal of the CASPER was to assess household level impacts via a survey in the south region of the county. The objectives were to determine the community's health needs and status, understand the household concerns about air and water, and describe household health experiences related to the sewage contamination, but also identify preferred methods of communication. The CASPER method is a validated method that's been used in a number of emergency responses that you may have heard about in the news, for example, the Flint water crisis, Deepwater Horizon crisis, and Hurricane Harvey. The CASPER was designed to represent approximately 41,000 households that are in the South region and Tijuana River Valley region, as you can see outlined in this slide. And a subset sample was collected or selected in pink for actual interviews. The teams went to households, 480 households. Oops, there they are, 480 households. 333 households, there was someone home to respond. And then 189 households completed the entire survey. And this was considered sufficient to be representative of that larger 41,000 households that I mentioned. So of the top household concerns, the most prominent was the health concerns about the household. Property was also mentioned 8% of the time, and then a number of other concerns at a lower rate. 7.7 reported direct contact with contaminated river water, and 16.2 reported direct contact with contaminated beach water in the preceding month. 65.4% took extra steps to avoid certain areas in the community because of the crisis. This slide is showing actions that people took to reduce the sewage smell, and these included closing windows, using candles or incense, air fresheners, and air filters, air purifiers. 89% took more than one, or took at least one or more actions to address the smell in their home. And 66% of those said that the steps they took either did not help or only helped sometimes. 59% of people said the sewage crisis was impacting their daily life, resulting in either many changes or some changes, mostly having to do with decreased outdoor activities such as visiting beaches, parks, and gardening. 67% of people in the community were saying their primary water source was bottled water, which is interesting. And 28.2% said that they changed their source of drinking water since the crisis began. In terms of communications, the most trusted sources for accurate information by the people responding was the health department at 55%, but family, friends, primary doctor were also there, and elected officials, as you could see. Now we'll talk about household beliefs. 92.7% believe that the quality of the Tijuana River water is not okay. 90.5% believe the quality of the nearby ocean water is not okay. And 77% believe that the quality of the air is not okay. We asked some true-false questions to the household members to see what their opinions were. 98% agreed that the sewage is causing air and water pollution. 96% said it causes bad odor. 89% agreed that the crisis is getting worse. 80% said the quality of life is negatively impacted. 71% felt that the tap water was not safe. Health was worsened for 67%. The community feels safe to live in was reported by only 53%, and only 12% said the cleanup is sufficient. Slide's not moving. Let's try that. There you go.
Did it move?
Can someone advance the slides?
There.
Great. We recovered. Okay, moving right along. In terms of household health, 35% of households said their overall health was fair or poor, but 70% said their conditions improved when they left the area. Unfortunately, 17% haven't been able to leave the area. And 69% of households had at least one family member with health symptoms that they attributed to the crisis. Specifically, in the preceding month, 45% of households had at least one member reporting health symptoms that they were attributing to the crisis. The symptoms include things like headache, nausea, cough, but also dizziness, fatigue, and migraine. Moving on to mental health issues. 58% said that the crisis was impacting their household by causing increased stress, with 24% saying that it increased stress a lot in the household. 65% reported one or more signs of emotional distress that include things like physical symptoms, increased anxiety, lack of energy, and depression. 65% also reported experiencing at least one or more behavioral health indicators, such as trouble sleeping, mood change, difficulty concentrating. Households attempted to make adaptive changes that included things like taking a different route, considering moving, missing work, or changing school or job. So in summary of the key findings, and I'm just touching the surface, there's a lot more data there, are the following. 87% are somewhat or very concerned about the sewage crisis. 81% are most concerned about the health of their household members. 70% reported they had at least one disruption of their household life. 77% believe the quality of life of the air in the area is not okay. 71% do not believe that their household tap water is safe to drink. 65% had at least one worsening health condition in the past month that they attributed to the crisis. 58% reported overall stress level has increased. 63% reported one or more signs of emotional distress, and 65% experienced one or more behavioral health indicators. So what has the County of San Diego been doing with this information? Well, as I alluded to, it's a collaboration with coordination and advocacy for the South Bay community. We continue to have monthly meetings with South Bay School District leadership, with the health clinics in the South Bay area, including the qualified family health centers. And all agencies meetings occur monthly with the agencies listed below at the state, local, and federal levels. We are also collaborating with ATSDR at CDC. A petition had been submitted by California's congressional delegation, and ATSDR worked with the county and APCD to secure data for the petition to support it. The activities that this will occur in response will include to conduct a public health assessment of hydrogen sulfide in the air, analyzing air monitoring data to determine whether breathing hydrogen sulfide could harm people's health, but we'll also determine whether surface water, sediment, and biota data are sufficient for public health assessment purposes. And the county will continue to collaborate with ATSDR in these response activities. In terms of drinking water, I mentioned what evidence of people having concerns about the safety of tap water. In response, the county reached out to the State Water Board, Deputy Secretary, and Special Counsel on water policy with specific actions were recommended to educate the community through proactive outreach to show how drinking water is tested regularly and kept safe in their community, but also to explore increasing the frequency of testing of drinking water to ensure its safety and reassure the community. The county is also working closely with Cal-Am and other regional water agencies and regional water board on their messaging as well. I mentioned mental health concerns. The county is working with its own behavioral health services group on education and promotion, including distributing mental wellness resource directory, sharing the community toolkit that's available in multiple languages. And while we conducted the ACE, a different kind of survey that I'll talk a little bit more about, since we were aware of the need for increased awareness of what the options were for treatment, we distributed mental health resources during the canvassing that was done for the ACE survey in South Bay. We've been promoting the 988 crisis line for resources and mental health evaluations, and have been considering messaging through insurance companies about mental health services that may be available to their clients. We've also had focused partnerships with key outpatient providers like behavioral services, communication, and engagement providers, and the South Region Collaborative. As I mentioned, we noted that healthcare providers are a trusted messenger during the CASPR results. So when the ACE survey started, we capitalized on that connection and incorporated them into the recruitment for people to go online with the ACE survey. And provided them with flyers and other information at that time. We continue to meet with South Bay Clinic providers and update surveillance activities, ongoing projects, and receive real-time feedback on clinical data and related to the sewage crisis. And we're working on separate projects to improve clinical surveillance, clinic-level surveillance provided to the health department. People mentioned concerns about their pets, and we at the county also feel that's an important priority. And so we've gotten our One Health epidemiology team, which is composed of veterinarians and epidemiologists, engaged in this crisis by contacting vets and animal hospitals and the Humane Society in South Region about the pet concerns, and also inquiring about cases of concerns when they have occurred. Other activities include air purifier distribution by our colleagues at APCD. There was both the initial distribution that was well received last year, and that was additional funding was secured to expand that to a wider community. UCSD Predictive Modeling Group is also working with the county to develop an advanced resident warning system for air pollution events to try and predict them in advance. So I mentioned the assessment for chemical exposure, or ACE survey, which was conducted by ATSDR at CDC, which was completed last year on November 22nd. It encompassed, there were 2,100 surveys that were completed during that. The results and analysis were pending during the federal blackout. Some of the communication was paused, but it's definitely resumed now. And this will provide further information on the individual level data related to the sewage crisis. It also has the advantage of documenting the impact on other types of people that are in the community. For example, people who are just working and not living in the community, those going to school, or people having recreational activities in the South Region. Our communications plan has included throughout this process, even during the planning and then during the CASPER progress, and then now that the results are in for the CASPER, board briefings to city managers, local, state, and federal officials, students and UCSD residents that participated in the CASPER, the Tijuana River Valley Task Force, and state and federal agencies that are involved in the crisis response. We also created a dedicated website with multiple resources and the complete written report, which is shown here and went live on January 16th. So in closing, we focus on the root cause, but we do appreciate the state and federal advocacy to fix the sewage infrastructure. Significant funding has been acquired to fix the sewage infrastructure, as you may be aware, but this systematically documented data will definitely help with that advocacy. The reopening of the San Antonio de los Buenos treatment plant south of Tijuana will also help. Once online, it will be able to take up to 18 million gallons of sewage a day. So continued state and local federal engagement using scientifically validated study results for advocacy and additional TJ River Valley funding is the focus of the county. And I'll stop there for questions.
Great, thank you so much, Mr. Beatty. I see no requests from the public to comment or ask questions, so I'm going to turn it over to the council for comments or questions. No, we're going to do it one. Any council comments or questions?
Good evening. Thank you for the presentation, Dr. Beatty. I was hoping you could give us some sort of something to relate this to. So the statistics you provided today are fascinating and disturbing in other ways. How does that compare to some of the numbers if you were involved in the Flint, Michigan events? How does this sort of compare to that, at least in your estimation?
So each one of these crisis events are very different from each other, so it's difficult to make direct comparisons between what happened in Flint and what's going on here. But the key thing was that, you know, we have all heard the stories of people's families being impacted, and it was important to systematically document the extent of what people were going through, because those numbers are something that you could really hang your hat on. And that Casper was the first attempt to show what residents in the community were experiencing. So it really was a great effort and goes a long way to provide specific numbers to the federal and state government about what's happening here.
Any other council comments or questions? Councilmember Fisher.
Thanks, Mayor. I can't imagine anybody else sitting in this audience today is looking at these numbers, not feeling a little bit overwhelmed. I don't even know how these numbers can get to our state and our federal government and then not send as much help as fast as they could. This is absolutely appalling. You look at the results, the survey results from 42,000 people, and wonder what's it really going to take in this community to get things moving. So, you know, I guess my question is, to your knowledge, is there anywhere else in this state that's having these types of environmental impacts?
Again, when there is a crisis similar to what's going on, well, each crisis is somewhat different. There have been other communities impacted by hydrogen sulfide, but it's not like this one, and so it's hard to make direct comparisons. And that's why it's important to do individual assessments like we've done here. And that the ACE survey will even add better numbers because it reaches out to over 2,000 people and also includes the impact on people who work and recreate in the area.
Now, you mentioned that originally the 480 households were contacted, 330 responded, and 100, just under 200 completed the survey. Is there going to be any efforts in the future, in the near future, to go out and look for another survey, or do you feel like what you've collected is sufficient?
I think that this is a fluid situation. It has been done in other crises-type responses where additional surveys have been conducted to see if the events or impacts that our households are experiencing continue. So that is something that is in the cards.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And then the county obviously has, you know, a little bit more responsibility than just collecting data. Do you know if currently the county is taking any action to remedy some of the stuff in the Tijuana River Valley that I believe is part of their properties? So
the key for the Casper was to make the case about what's going on and document the extent of the problem. And the first and most important is to get that information to those agencies, both at the state and federal level, that could provide the funding to improve the infrastructure, because that's the root cause of the problem. And so that's where a lot of the county efforts are. But I think I mentioned we've already talked about addressing mental health issues and also have tried to improve the situation with people's understanding of the safety of tap water. Tap water does not come from the Tijuana River, and it's mandated to be tested regularly. People are spending time and money thinking that they need to get bottled water when that actually they could save that time if improved communication about the safety of tap water was available.
You know, I appreciate that comment, and I agree that, you know, some of the people in the region might be better served with their time and their money, you know, but it just goes to show you that this problem can create so many different sub-problems. You know, I don't know what's really going to be next on the line if they're worried about their water, and again, it's regulated and tested off, but again, I'm perplexed that we continue to have these problems in our area, and you know, our state especially has done nothing. The governor has continued to not answer our calls for help, and I'm hoping that the advocacy that goes forward, including the results from the survey, really back up that this isn't just a federal problem, that it's actually affecting those who live in the state of California. So thank you for your time and for being here.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Mayor Pro Tem.
I was really glad to see that you included pets on it too, because, you know, people are at the top of the food chain, and the wildlife, we don't even count that. And then we're counting our household pets, which is a good thing. I had a neighbor that allowed his dog to swim in the sea, lost all of its hair. Two of them lost all of its hair because of some kind of infection. So we need to be cognizant of all the animal life as well as our human life here. Thank you.
Agree.
Thank you. I have a few questions myself. So you mentioned that the change in perception for distrust of the source of drinking water happened after the crisis, but you didn't define which one. Was it the sewage crisis in general, or is it the boil water advisory that we had, which we may or may not have been related to the sewage crisis?
The boil water advisory that occurred after Tropical Storm Hillary probably contributed to some of the distrust. That boil water advisories are issued when there's some testing results that concern the authorities that deal with those results. The question is probably being in part due to that. But the mandated testing goes on a regular basis, and that event was declared over more than a year ago.
Okay, thank you. And then you said that 65% of people surveyed were showing emotional distress or had mental or behavioral health concerns or challenges. And I see that you developed a mental wellness toolkit and that you've been working with some of the school districts. But other than posting it on your website, what specific actions are you doing, or what specific programs and services are you offering the people of Imperial Beach so that they can better access these mental and behavioral health care services from the county?
So the survey showed that although we had saw that 65%, that the number of people who actually reached out to get care, mental health care, was I think it was less than 20%. So that suggests that people either may not realize there are services available, or may not realize where they are or how accessible they are. And so all of those activities, because there is quite a bit of presence of behavioral health services and other providers for mental health in the area, is to make sure people know exactly how to reach them, and also access things that are temporary measures like the 988 number that I mentioned.
And how would people know to call that number?
Sorry?
How would people know to call 988?
That's what we're doing. We're doing social media posting. We're working with our behavioral health colleagues that have the connections in the community as well. And we're trying to get it out there as much as possible so that people know these resources are there.
Okay, thank you for that. And then regarding the federally qualified health clinics, are you still only looking at emergency department data, or are you following the symptoms that you listed in your slide, the migraines and the headaches and the sinusitis and all of that?
So the symptoms in the slide were reported. People could report, a number of different symptoms. We are working with federally qualified health centers, the Kaiser Clinic, and other clinics in the area to look at health issues, not just GI or asthma problems. So we're exploring a number of different options, and it's not limited to emergency departments.
And those are in the South Bay?
Those are all in the South Bay, but it's also important to have comparison groups to document what's different about what's happening in South Bay compared to the rest of the county.
Sure, of course, there's got to be a baseline comparison. Regarding the ATSDR assessment, the ACE survey, you said that the data is pending. When do you expect that data to be shared? Because it is very clear that neither of the two treatment plants that you mentioned treat any of the chemicals, and that is a serious concern for what's being aerosolized. So when do you expect those results to be available?
We're working on a timeline now with ATSDR because of the federal pause in communication, so I don't have a specific date. But we want to respond and get that information out as soon as possible. And we'll be developing tools similar to the Casper dashboard and making the ACE results available online, the full report, as soon as it's ready.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation and for answering our questions. We're going to move on to the next item, which is item number 4B, presentation by Baja California Governor's Office on the San Antonio de los Buenos wastewater treatment plant update. And let me just make another announcement, because some of you I see that arrived late. So we're going to take public comment after each of the presentations. So as you see them wrapping up, submit your blue speaker so that your speaker request, so that you can ask the question of that particular presenter. We're going to take public comment first after the presentation, and then we're going to do council comments and questions, okay? You can't hear? Is that better? Okay. That good? All right. Please proceed. I'd like to invite Rebecca Boutros Almaraz, Director of Binational Economic Affairs with the State of Baja California, to give the presentation. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you very much, Mayor Aguirre. First of all, I would like to start off by introducing myself as Becky. I am binational. I was born and raised in San Diego, grew up in San Diego and in Tijuana. I completely understand everything that you're going through, and we are very aware. We, as Becky and as part of the Mexican government, I'd like to apologize for 30 years of people not doing anything regarding the Tijuana River. I was here last year with Secretary Kurt, which is my immediate boss, and he actually walked over on your side, stood behind that microphone and said, "I'm one of you. I have a house in Coronado, I understand." So we can't fix what's been ignored for 30 years in 3 years, and I do want to say Governor Avila is the first governor in a very long time that looks at this as a priority. And I appreciate very much, Mayor Aguirre, that you invite us to this and give us the opportunity as a state government to be here and present everything that we've been doing. I'd also like to give a shout out to Sally Spanner from the IBWC. She has been a great ally, working constantly with the Mexican federal government on San Antonio de los Buenos project. So I'd like to start off with a timeline. Where should I point? There we go. I'd like to start off with a timeline as to how it all started in San Antonio de los Buenos. It was January 2024 when we had Ambassador Ken Salazar join Governor Avila, and they did the groundbreaking. After that, we moved on to the first follow-up meeting, which was binational. It was a small meeting with the Mexican government. Then we did a binational follow-up meeting on April. Then we moved on to a California EPA visit from Secretary Yana Garcia in July. Then in August, we had a binational meeting with a wastewater treatment plant visit. And as you can see, we've got Sarah Jacobs, Juan Vargas, Mayor Aguirre is right there. We've got Commissioner Giner, Sally, Isela Canava, the Mexican side. And we've always had our doors open. We've always invited everybody to come see what's going on, how we're moving forward, and what's actually happening. After that, we had Governor Newsom come visit the plant. After that, we had another binational follow-up meeting. And to this date, I can say that Train 1 is actually stabilized and working. So if I move on, you can see how it started, how it looked back in August, and when we had Governor Newsom come in October, and this is what it looks like now. So construction was finished back in, if I'm not wrong, I think it was January, or it was, it was actually December when we finalized all construction. And we started pumping in water during February. These are all of the ongoing activities. This was the last update that I received was given to me at the beginning of March. This is another picture of how it's going. And this is the whole process for the treatment. Now, we have to understand that I'm no professional at this. I'm literally just representing the Baja California state government, but I'm more than welcome to share this presentation so that you can have. And currently what was going on is a two-phase biological process. And like I said, the Train 1, so if you look on your left side, you can see with the green, that side was being stabilized and officially on March 24th, I spoke to Mayor Monge, which is one of the constructors from Sedena, and he told me that it's already been stabilized, and they have already started. They've already started passing water through Train 2. Now, we have to understand that these can operate individually or together. And we can't say, I'd love to tell you that on April 30th, Train 2 will be stabilized, but if it keeps raining, the water gets diluted and we can actually measure to complete, so that we can comply with the norms that Semarnat imposes, which is the NOM 00 number 001, Semarnat 2021. So these have to be measured specifically every month, but if it's needed, depending on certain circumstances, they will be measured as needed. There was a couple of rumors that were spreading around in the news that the pumps that were sent or that were placed in San Antonio de los Buenos weren't good for sludge. So there's different pumps. One are for water, some are for sludge, and then they also mentioned that we didn't have enough energy capacity. So we already have the substation, which is now operated by a CFE, and it has its certification. And that was a visit when they came. So if there's any questions, more than welcome to answer.
Thank you so much, Becky. Just double check and see if there's any requests to speak on this item. I don't see none. Yes, there's one request on all items. Mr. Benham, do you want to ask your question?
Well, I'm here to just make a public statement and respond. You know, in the Reader of 1988, there's a story about the shocking history of the Tijuana sewage problem. And it really calls out for the SAB plant that was funded in and started in 1985, completed in 1988, and shut down in 1990. So that's a history that you don't account for. Also in that article, it showed that Mexico had agreed to build an additional 56 million gallon a day plant down south of there, and they never carried through with that. Even though the pipes and the pumps from the river that were installed then that can carry 80 million gallons to that location were installed. These are the same pumps that now, because of the viaduct road and the Gate 2 project that is on Otay Mesa, were identified together several times in correspondence in newspapers. Now that viaduct has destroyed those very pipes that carry the sewage down to this location. And so the history that you're showing of a 17 million gallon a day plant that was shut down in 1990, gee, that's 35 years ago. And that's the problem, is that the Mexican government, however their machinations are, they fail to carry through with their promises, with their written agreement, because Ronald Reagan did that agreement, and that's how Mexico got the Colorado River water here. It's the same water that is now coming down the Tijuana River at a tune of 50 million gallons a day. And it's just the 17 million gallons a day will not solve or even scratch the surface of a city that is estimated at 3.3 million and produces anywhere between 140 to 200 million gallons a day of sewage. So
Thank you, Mr. Benham. Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your time has expired. Next, we have Truth, who's going to speak on item number 4B, followed by Ramon Chaires, followed by, I'm not sure if Didi wanted to speak to item 4A or 4B. You don't want to speak anymore. Okay. So then it's just going to be Ramon Chaires. Please proceed. You have 2 minutes.
Okay. Hi, thank you for the apology. Becky, I appreciate that. Is that the first one on record from anyone from Mexico who's in an official position? Maybe not. I'm not sure. I haven't been alive long enough. That's why I really appreciated the previous comments. If only I could be alive longer, I could have more history to refer to. That was also the first photo, evidence that I've seen that anything's happening with that plant. How would I know living in America? I wouldn't know. I can't visit. It's not free to visit. It requires a passport, for one thing. Newscomb visited in October. Is that the only time he's actually had any real, tangible something at all? That's it. No declaration of a state of emergency, nothing that would actually help, right? Just photo ops. How many delays has there been on this one plant? You didn't say that. And something else you didn't address, because you were blaming rain as the official position, apparently. That's the first I've heard that. What about the wrong pipes that were bought? That's what I heard. And what about the sewage spills that I heard about? Were there like 2 sewage spills that just happened? Okay, you didn't address that. Did any American money, tax dollars, go to this treatment plant, if any? Yes, okay. And the county said it's going to have a capacity of 18 million gallons. Is that okay in the Mexican government's opinion? Is that okay in the American government's opinion? That we should have any capacity at all? That we should have any need for the treatment plants at all? I would like to see a change in that policy, that we start holding Mexico accountable, not treating them, how would you put it, giving them preferential treatment. Because if any other country was doing this, we wouldn't tolerate it one day. So the policies need to change. And if Mexico is having trouble with building the treatment plant, rather than trying to promise something they can't actually deliver on time, maybe they should just ask us for help. Be transparent about what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we're going to move on to Ramon Chaires. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate that. I just had a question about the capacity that you mentioned. So I know that I've read somewhere between 17 to 20 million gallons per day once it comes online. But what I'm also hearing is that what's flowing through there right now is almost twice as much. And so give us a little bit of clarity around, once it comes online, you'll be able to process so much, but how much will be left over and still be essentially dumped out into the ocean, just so that we have some clarity on that.
So San Antonio de los Buenos can process 800 liters per second, which is how much in gallons, Sally?
18 million gallons a day.
And I believe it's I think 400 per second, liters per second that are left untreated, and those are the ones that are being sent to the ocean. Again, I am not the expert, but also I'd like to address the question regarding the international collector. They are working on that specifically, and there is this agreement which is called Minute 328, which has 17 different projects, and they're all working simultaneously. I would love I can share my email with you, and if you'd like to share your comments, I can definitely check back with the correct team and get back to you as well.
Cool. So does that mean that remaining will be basically dumped out in that same area?
So my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the agreement is whatever's not treated is always sent over to the South Bay Water Plant. And since the South Bay Water Plant is also being under rehab, they have been unable to receive whatever at San Antonio de los Buenos hasn't been cleaning. Now, we have to understand that San Antonio de los Buenos wasn't working at all. And it's not that I appreciate the history lesson, Sir, if I don't recall your name, but at this point, it's not just Mexico that doesn't comply and doesn't follow up on their promises. And I can't speak for 30 years ago or 35 years ago. I was born in 1989. I'd love to know more about it. I'd love to answer. But again, if you would like to share your questions, send me your letters and everything. I will respond as briefly as possible, as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chaires. Okay, we're going to move on to council comments or questions at this point. Do we have it? Councilmember Leyva Gonzalez.
First, thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you for your honesty and your clarity. My question is, so initially in the news, they had stated that the pumps that were purchased were not the appropriate pumps, so that was not accurate?
No. So the plant is still under the command of Sedena, which is our military. And as soon as the plant is turned over to the commission, which is CESP, and it belongs to the state, we will be able to give full response and even invite you to see what you're looking for. But if you'd like to have more information, we would have to go through Foreign Affairs. But I can tell you, we have everything that complies with what is needed, and we do have pumps for sludge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember McKay.
Follow-up question about the processing of the sludge. Where is Mexico taking that sludge currently? Or where's the plan to take it?
Can we go back to the presentation, please? Currently, it's being kept inside the San Antonio de los Buenos area, but every time that it's being removed, it's constantly being cleaned. So, I mean, obviously, as soon as CESP has control over the plant, I would love to have all of you. We can have, a delegation trip that can be hosted maybe by the chamber, Kenya, and invite you to see with your own eyes and see what it looks like, what it feels like, walk around and clear up any questions that you guys have.
Thank you. Just to follow up, I know my understanding is the current ITP on the U.S. side treats 25 million gallons a day, and I understand they transport about 8 double truckloads down to Mexico. So at 18 million gallons, I would assume you've got like 4 or 5 trucks worth every day. What kind of capacity do you guys have for sludge?
I will check that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other council comments or questions?
Thanks for being here. At their last workshop we had last year, we were promised this treatment plant would be open by the end of the year. And, we understand things happen. So the fact that you brought pictures to show us what's actually happening is very reassuring. Just so I'm sure, that plant is primarily processing wastewater that's on this kind of on the south side of the mountain. Is that correct? Okay. And then on one of your slides, very interesting, when you talked about how the process works, at the very bottom said clarified water. Does Mexico at some point have any plans to solve their drought problem and reliance on U.S. water and do some water purification? It's for water reclamation and purification for drinking water.
Just yet.
I just think, it'd be some wisdom in that, because obviously we've seen what's happening in Texas and some of the regulations that the current administration are enacting against, Mexico because of their lack of providing water back that they've agreed upon. And I can't imagine that the shortage of water that we'll see in this area is going to be mitigated anytime soon with a long-term thing. And I think on our side, we should have water reclamation and, purifying instead of just dumping the water out into the ocean. I wish that both sides would get together, have a comprehensive plan, and solve the problem for water sourcing, and also instead of having wastewater treatment going back into our, because that's the hard part. I think there's some probably bigger conversations that need to happen, but Mexico is buying American water, then flushing it back into us and polluting our river valley, our beaches. It's causing the problems that the county mentioned in the survey. And I just think it's an important part, so maybe at some point somebody needs to have those conversations on a much higher level with some urgency.
Absolutely, and we have to understand that Mexico is at least 30 years behind you. We have too much work to do and too little time. And at this point, they have been working constantly, and with the 17 projects that are being worked with the Minute 328, they're working pretty fast. But our priority right now is to get the stop contamination. Number 2 is how are we going to reuse this water? Number 3, we still have three more wastewater treatment plants that we're working on as well. So, it's step by step. I wish we could, be as fast and that we had the opportunity, or we had the governors that actually put in the work. Because it's not the opportunity, it's the government and the administrations that weren't doing their work. But at this point, we are more than ready to collaborate, and our doors are open, and we want to have clean water as well. It's not just you guys that are living in contamination. We live and breathe it as well.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. You still didn't answer Councilmember McKay's question when he says, where do you dump it? You just said, we take it over and clean it out. And so where is it stored in Mexico? Because I was told and shown that you bring it up on the hill and dump it, and it comes back in the United States anyway further down the road.
I think there's miscommunication regarding what's going on in Cañón del Matadero and what's actually going on in San Antonio de los Buenos, located in Punta Bandera. So the sludge that is removed from San Antonio de los Buenos stays inside San Antonio de los Buenos. And they are reusing it and they're pouring it in different areas. If we could show eventually, or if we look into a map, Google Maps, you'll see the size of what San Antonio de los Buenos is. And it's just pushed over and over. And what they're doing with it exactly, I will look into it and I will send you an email with with exact information. But what's happening in Cañón del Matadero is, yes, infrastructure in Mexico, we hadn't gotten any money for 30 years as well, or 20 years, because the Federation never looked at us. Baja California is not considered part of, we weren't looked at. So at this point, we finally got the budget to get new infrastructure. We're getting money for San Antonio de los Buenos. We got a new border, and once they started removing and working in Cañón del Matadero, the sediments start moving, and the sand. I'm no expert again, but I can understand when they remove plants and vegetation, everything starts moving, and if it rains, it pours into the river. So that's what was happening. But they're not throwing sludge, and obviously construction has accidents. There are delays. It can be weather, it can be in the vendors, it can be construction sites, it can be accidents. So I think it's a pretty darn good deal that we were able to be finished from zero to end in a little bit over a year. I understand.
All right, seeing no further questions, I just want to thank you again for being here. I think I've said this many times before, but I just want to say it today again. It's night and day, the difference, what we've seen with past administrations and the current Baja California administration. Back when I was working many years ago at Wild Coast, and we were going to the plant to push the CES and the Baja California government for fixes, we were told repeatedly to our faces that the pollution never made it across the border and that nothing was polluting us on our side. Chris Helmer can attest to that, because we've been working on this for a long time. So it's day and night when you have governors in the past of Baja California saying, nope, we have studies that show that the pollution doesn't get to you at all, compared to Governor Del Pilar, who says, yes, we're acknowledging this is an issue and we're going to do everything we can to make it better. Not to fix it, because she knows it's not going to happen overnight, but to try and make things better. And I will say, based on what my first meet and greet with her when she first got elected was, and what she's demonstrating now, is she's actually taking steps forward. And it's because of the past president and the current president. And for that, I'm very grateful. Is it enough? Obviously not. Obviously, right? We have a long way to go. I also share the concerns that were raised by Mr. Chaitis earlier about, the 18 million gallon capacity per day is not enough. We have still 20 to 40 million gallons of flow in the river that are not being treated, neither of the two plants. My concerns are around chemicals being dumped into the river. So I'd like, if you can talk a little bit about that, because I've talked to some of the local nonprofits as well, and they were talking about who's regulating these assembly plants that are dumping, which, by the way, many are American-owned. Who's monitoring that, and how are we preventing that from happening? And then lastly, my question is around coming back to Councilmember Fisher's question about wastewater recycling. where is the state of Baja California in those efforts? Because obviously, if we had more water recycling in Tijuana, we would have much less flow in the river because of the 2 treatment plants on the east side of Tijuana dumping clean water into it. Can you elaborate on those 2 points, please?
Okay, so on the recycling one, what I have heard is they are looking into a plan that eventually we're going to be able to reuse that water. And the recycling one, I think maybe Sally, you could help me explain a little bit more?
Mayor Aguirre, member of council. Is it appropriate for
Yeah,
me
can you
to
just
speak
state,
now? Yes.
identify yourself?
My name
please?
is Sally Spiener, and I'm the United States Secretary for the International Boundary and Water Commission. And under Minute 328, which Rebecca has mentioned, they do have a new disposal and reuse project, and it is currently in the works. They're doing the initial studies and planning, et cetera, so that the treated effluent from the 2 wastewater treatment plants in Mexico, La Morita and Arturo Herrera, that currently goes into the Tijuana River and contributes to those flows that we have to do something with, will eventually be disposed of in Mexico, and I think they're going to do some sort of an aquifer recharge where it would eventually make it into the reservoirs over there. So it is, I guess, an indirect reuse project. The United States Environmental Protection Agency, I believe, is one of the funders of that project, and that will be a very important project to help reduce the flows in the river, as well as another project, I think they call it the Gates Project, which is addressing some additional sewage flows that are coming into the river to help reduce that. So there are a number of things in the work, both for reuse as well as other infrastructure projects to reduce the flows in the river.
Is there a timeline for that? Because that's been in conversations for many years now.
Yes, and they're not going to happen overnight. That's the great frustration, I think, of all of us. It takes time to do major infrastructure projects. Our website does have a tool where you can click on it and you can get updates on all of the different Minute 328 projects and see what the status is. Are they still waiting for a budget? Are they in planning and design? Are they completed, under construction? So I encourage people to look for that information on our website, and you can see the status of all the different projects.
Thank you so much, Secretary Spiener. And then could you just maybe elaborate a little bit? I know it's maybe outside of this realm of conversation, but it's still relevant when it comes to the chemical dumping of maquiladoras.
So regarding the chemicals, the last thing that I heard personally, and I will look into that as well, was that they weren't receiving industrial chemicals and chemical waste. It was actually untreated domestic waters. But I did receive, I just actually received an email from CELA right now, and it comes with a couple different numbers that I will look into right now, but I haven't fully read it and I don't understand it. So I don't want to, give out the wrong information. But the last I heard is no chemicals found, just untreated domestic waters.
In your testing?
I'm sorry?
In the state's testing?
No, in the IBWC testing.
IBWCs.
Thank you, Sally.
I have not seen the latest results. We have a new study that's underway. We did another one about 6 years or so ago, and that one did find, generally speaking, it is mostly household sewage that we see. There are a few impacts that we saw. I know there was one, it's a substance that leaches from plastic trash that was detected. We had some slight exceedances on the heavy metals, and again, that was a study that was previously done. We recognized the need to update the study, and I know they started the sampling, but I haven't seen the results that I guess you may be looking at there. But the overall conclusion from the previous study was it was largely household sewage, not industrial. I can tell you there are other places on the border where the industrial issues are tremendous compared to what we've seen here.
And I think Scripps is going to talk about that, right? Yeah, okay, good. Okay. Becky, I want to thank you again for being here and being straightforward with us and taking the time to educate us and bring us up to speed. When can we expect the ribbon cutting to happen? You said April. When is the ribbon cutting happening?
So The ribbon cutting, we don't have an actual date just yet. I know some of you are curious because President Sheinbaum is visiting this Saturday, but it's not on the agenda. It's not San Antonio de los Buenos, that's just going to be ribbon cutting. But she will be in visiting Baja California. But we don't have a specific date. I think they want to wait for Train 2 so that it can be an official date. We're estimating it's going to be April 30th, but if it rains, that changes because it dilutes the water. So we'll keep you posted.
And I'm sorry, I forgot, I wanted to ask one of the questions that haven't been addressed yet. The funding that was used for San Antonio de los Buenos is 100% Mexican funding, correct?
Well, we have received also funding from NatBank.
From NatBank, which is the source, what is the source? Is it congressionally approved source of funding from the U.S.?
I will check for that as well.
Both countries are contributing, but my understanding is Mexico had committed $144 million.
What I do know is it's important, I will look into that as well, but I do know it's important that we keep receiving funding from the U.S., considering that if we don't have enough to fix in Mexico, whatever you guys do on this side, it's not going to be fixed at all.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you. We're going to move. Oh, we still have one more question. Please proceed.
Sorry, Mayor, I'll be really quick. So, you mentioned that that basically Mexico doesn't have the funding to provide the infrastructure. And I know there's some early talks going on about using some of the toll revenues and creating a mitigation fund from Mexico City and for the state of Baja. To your knowledge, has Mexico ever asked the United States to help with things like water reclamation? I mean, a formal ask? Because I just, I think it was mentioned earlier by somebody who's attending tonight that, would it hurt to just ask the United States for help? I mean, I don't think this is a situation to be too proud or just looking for opportunities because, you said you're 30 years behind us. What does that look like in 5 years? Are you 40 years behind us? And I mean, there has to be a point where it catches up because, again, we're looking at the Otay Mesa 2 East Crossing and the amount of commerce, jobs, population that's going to create in Mexico. And I just don't see where we can continue to claim that there's no progress. I'm trying to understand a little bit more from the financial point of and again, I know this is a huge question, so I don't expect you to have specific answers, but just, what can we expect? Because this is a historic problem, and no matter how big of a collector we build on our side, it's not going to solve the problem. The root of the problem will continue to be the same. It's a lack of infrastructure in Mexico, and what you've told us tonight is 30 years behind. I can't imagine another generation having to endure this.
No, so I understand where you're going to, and it's not necessarily that we're 30 years behind in everything and we're going to stay that way. I think that if we actually look at the infrastructure and how we're working, well, we already finished Otay on our side. We already finished San Antonio de los Buenos on our side. We're just stabilizing Train 2. And if I look at the states and I compare it to that, Otay border hasn't even begun a groundbreaking. South Bay Water Plant, Commissioner Giner has been working endlessly to get the funding. Commissioner Giner has been visiting San Antonio de los Buenos constantly, so I wouldn't say we're proud and we don't ask help from the states. I think we ask help and we invite them to join us, to work with us. And I think that this administration, specifically speaking just for Baja California, I can't say for Chihuahua or Tamaulipas that they didn't return the water or continue I'm not from there, I can only speak for Baja. We're working very closely, and I think the collaboration and the relationship, just like Madam Mayor mentioned earlier, Governor Avila, she's willing and ready to work. She's willing and ready to ask for help, open doors, collaboration. I don't think I've ever seen I think past administration, Governor Bonilla, he lives here. Did he ever join? Did he ever send anybody? And I'm not speaking against him. I'm just saying this administration, we are not just asking for help. We want to join.
Does that conclude your comments, Councilmember Fisher? All right, we're going to move along. Thank you so much. We're going to move next to presentation by the Scripps Institution of Oceanography on research related to the Tijuana River. I'd like to invite Maylee Heyer with Scripps to give the presentation.
Testing. Okay. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Miley. I'm a graduate student in the Prather Lab at SIO. And this is Beatriz, a postdoctoral scholar also in our lab. Just checking. Okay, great. So our lab is investigating the link between water pollution and air quality. This past summer and winter, we completed intense month-long sampling campaigns along the coastline and inland at Imperial Beach. So at first, our lab was focused mostly on the coast, but feedback from residents helped us to identify an inland source of air pollution highlighted here on the map. So in that red box, this is on the Saturn Road where the river crosses. So at this location, the river kind of forms this turbulent waterfall that churns up all that water and allows gases and other pollutants to escape into the air. So this turbulent waterfall is kind of a big source for airborne pollutants. So once we identified this source, we doubled our efforts to sample both along the coast and closer to this location inland. So we've collected a high volume of samples that cover a wide range of pollutants that are associated with sewage and industrial water pollution in the air and in the water. So some examples on the screen, we're looking at air pollutants, chemical pollutants from industrial waste and sewage, VOCs, biological pollutants, pathogens, and heavy metals. We are working very hard to process and analyze all these data. It's a lot. But today we do have some data to show you all. The clicker's a bit touchy. Oh, okay.
It was me, sorry.
So during the summer, I'm sure all of you here remember the rotten egg odor was extremely present and unbearable here at IB. Yeah.
Yes, it's been bad these last few days.
Yeah. This figure here, there's a lot to look at. I'm going to break it down. So first of all, this figure is of our data from September. And the black line is hydrogen sulfide gas that we measured in the air. That's the gas that's responsible for that rotten egg smell. And then the red line with the dots, those are the number of community odor complaints to the hotline. And that sharp drop in both community odor complaints and hydrogen sulfide gas occurred at the same time that a pipeline was fixed, and that pipeline allowed wastewater to be diverted, and the flow rate of the Tijuana River dropped dramatically. So again, we're seeing a drop in the river, and also a drop in the hydrogen sulfide smell, and a drop in community odor complaints. So this is just a strong example of how the pollution in the water impacts the quality of the air, and the quality of the air has a real impact on the lives of people in South Bay. In other words, these data show what you already know and experience, that avoiding the water and the beach is not enough to protect residents from the effects of the pollution, because the bad air is not confined to where the bad water is, right? Next. Okay. This is a very big figure, and I know it's kind of small on your screen, so I apologize for that. I want to draw your attention to the part on the bottom right. The bottom right is data that we've collected from January to the present. The gray line is hydrogen sulfide gas measured in the air closer to that river site where the turbulent waterfall is. And the smaller blue line, kind of just at the very bottom, is hydrogen sulfide that we measured right along the coast, right by the pier, actually. And so to us, these data further support how the river is a significant inland source of pollution. So across Imperial Beach, there are multiple sources of pollution, both along the coast and inland, that can harm residents. You know, it's not just one or the other, it's everywhere. There's many sources. Oh, and Beatriz is taking over.
Hi, everyone. So after the winter and summer campaigns, we have, as Miley said, an enormous amount of data to process in the lab. And if you had one of us in your homes during the summer collecting samples, or if you saw us around, I know you're excited to have the information back, and that's also why it's important for us to come here and say that we are doing our best to have everything published as soon as possible. Science has its own time, but we're trying to help speed it up as much as possible because this is our top priority. Meanwhile, we are still here in the community. Every week we have a number of air quality monitors around the city that you can see on the map right there. And we have a trailer next to the hotspot with continuous measurements for H2S, particulates, and other pollutants. And we also have other community efforts as well. We are very proud to say that our Youth Climate Advisors Group from Mar Vista High, a project where the students conduct oral history, maybe one of you has been interviewed by them, and air quality measurements. They have won the Port of San Diego Award for Anchors of Excellence Award, and we're very happy to support that initiative. And as has been proven time and time, your quality of life is very affected, and we're also looking into that. So we are currently conducting in-depth interviews with community members. If anyone is interested, you can reach me out here or after on email. Yeah?
Our emails.
Yeah, you can leave it there, yeah. And probably next week we'll have a new survey on your sleep quality, because we know that it's been very affected, and that affects, you know, it's a fundamental piece of quality of life that we want to understand more and be able to have all this data together, all your experiences, and be able to publish that together with this amazing data that the team has collected as well. Last but not least, we also have an older tool. We know this past few weeks have been terrible as well. We've been seeing that. And you can scan the QR code that's also on our social media and website, and you can tell us where you are and where did you smell it, how it was. So it can also help us correlate to the data we are seeing. And yeah, thank you so much. And
Great. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to public comments now, starting with Ramon Chaides, followed by Leon Benham. You have 2 minutes. I would suggest you just ask all of your questions and finish your comments so that you use your time wisely, and then they can answer after.
I just have questions. So I know that what we've been looking at in the River Valley specifically when it comes to toxic gases, we know there's other toxic gases, not just hydrogen sulfide, but we're focusing on that. And I know that earlier, you know, our representative from the county mentioned something about looking at the risks with hydrogen sulfide. And so we know, based on what the community has told us about the smells there in the last few years, that that's been in the River Valley for a few years. I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years, who knows, right? What we don't know is what the long-term impacts are of a community being chronically being exposed to hydrogen sulfide, even at low levels. And so I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about that, if you have any knowledge on that, and if anybody is looking at that, because I think there's an opportunity there to really analyze what's been happening in our River Valley and what our community's been exposed to. And I'm hoping that the county can talk a little bit about that as well, because that's something that I would imagine our public agencies should be looking at. Not whether or not it's there now, but how long it's been there and how long our communities, our kids, our elders have been exposed to that, and what the long-term impacts are on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on next to Leon Benham.
Well, maybe I could help you, because the impacts of long-term exposure have been studied for decades by some of the biggest labs in the world, especially the recent COVID incident. There's 11 world-class laboratories that definitively know the long-term exposure to these gases. Once you can smell it once, it doesn't really affect you, but they know now that long-term exposure has direct effect on pregnant women, young kids that are developing, and the elderly with previously that their immune systems are depleted. So I wanted to tell you, there is a study. It's done by the IBWC. It was done under the EPA and under Jane Harkin in 2019. And you were asking, is there a study? Well, there is. It's studied about 26 different locations, soil and water samples for a year. And it came back that although the toxicity is not perfect, it's well below EPA standards. And this is why the EPA rejected the Superfund site. It just doesn't get that high. And one of the things that you see in this report is during the rainy season, toxicity drops because the water goes and it drains to the ocean. What the funny thing is, in the ponds of water, the toxicity stays high. So the County Water Quality Board, by ponding sewage in the valley, is the exact opposite thing that you want to do. You want the water to run to the ocean quickly, just like it used to do prior to 1993.
Thank you very much. Next, we're going to move on to Marvel Harrison, followed by Margaret Williamson.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here and doing a presentation. I think the last, especially 24 months, has been a great rise of awareness in our community and surrounding areas, which I think has been critical and something that hasn't happened. And thanks to the folks from Scripps for doing that. And I really appreciate you not referring to when we had the heat wave and the high gases. Yes, the two went together, but I swear this week it has been just as bad, and it ain't hot. So I think we don't want to confuse that, so I appreciate that piece. And I want to know what's being done or what's being considered for our children in terms of neurodevelopment and being exposed, because that hot spot is within 1/2 to 1 mile radius of over 2,000 children that go to school in our communities. So I don't know if that's yours or if that's something that Dr. Beatty can address, but I really think we need to have intervention on analysis of what's happening long term. And I think our biggest study that needs to happen right now is what is the cost on every level, economically, health, ecologically, animals, on inaction. What is it costing us to not act? And there are good economists who can do this work and tell us, and I think that's where we maybe need to put some study so that we can bend the will of the powers that be to make this go away. We all know that sewage is bad news for humans and animals when it's exposed like this, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we're going to go to Margaret Williamson.
Thank you. I'll just be real brief. I'm really wondering, I've come to these meetings before. The Tijuana River is supposed to be a river that flows, but it doesn't. It's full of invasive plants. It's got garbage in it. Why is the river not being cleaned out so that it flows and it can cleanse itself? I'd like an answer to that. I mean, that's just ridiculous, because everything is, we're living next to cesspools. There's no life in them or anything. It's terrible. So it's a question I'd like an answer to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we're gonna, Cheryl asked to speak, but she didn't mark a number. Did you want to speak to this item? Oh, 4A, okay. Go ahead.
I live in West Chula Vista, southwest Chula Vista, about a mile inland. And about a year and a half ago, when it was really, really bad, it was waking us up in the middle of the night. And it was very confusing for us because we'd never dealt with what all you've been dealing with down here. And, you know, we had a little confusion. Was it coming from the landfill or was it coming from the sewage? You know, we live in that area where we get both. But my question is, your Casper's survey went to Imperial Beach, Coronado, and San Diego, but not Chula Vista. And your city manager plan that you communicate with does not include Chula Vista. We've made many complaints to our mayor, John McCann, and he was always very responsive. I know this is on his radar. I know he wants to fix it too, so I'm wondering why you're not working with Chula Vista. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. All right, so let's go to the first questions that were asked, and then we'll come back to the Casper question.
Okay, I'll start. Thank you so much for your questions. So our colleagues from San Diego State University couldn't be here, but they are currently, I don't know if you know, but they are currently conducting a health study that has a longitudinal study that's having people fill it out every month throughout a year to also assess these impacts. And I think it's very important to fill it out when you feel something. This School of Public Health is very invested in looking at this. Our lab, in our interviews and surveys, we are looking at quality of life also because proving health impacts is very complicated, as you probably have heard and known and experienced, right? When you go to a doctor and you say that you're feeling something, can you directly correlate it to that? Some doctors will question that, some doctors won't. And as kids were also mentioned, that's why we are focusing on sleep quality as well, because we know it has a very significant neurological impact in the neurodevelopment of children and also the whole community. So we're trying to assess and kind of complement what SDSU is doing, and they'll be happy to address and talk a little bit more. I'm sorry that they couldn't be here today about the health impacts, but we are looking into quality of life to kind of paint this whole picture of how everyone is being affected. Do you want to say? That was perfect. Okay.
Okay, and Mr. Beatty, I know that Casper is a CDC, Centers for Disease Control study that you supported as a county, but could you perhaps try and address that question?
So just to repeat, the question is, why wasn't Chula Vista included?
That was the question, yes.
Okay. So the Casper was trying to look at the areas that are in closest proximity to the river and the problems and where the most of the complaints are coming from in an effort to really get as much data of, we're not saying that it is not affecting other areas, and the ACE survey expanded its area to include the Strand and Coronado. And the ACE also allowed people that were visiting the area to comment, like, for example, people who lived in neighboring areas like Chula Vista, but worked in the South Bay region. And so efforts were made to capture those, but we had to set some limits given the proximity to the actual river and the issues going on, and use the complaint data from APCD to base those decisions on.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to turn it now to council comments or questions. Councilmember Fisher.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for the team from Scripps for being out here and sharing some of your wisdom. I didn't ever think to ask this previous. What you studied was the hydrogen sulfides or sulfates? So is that naturally occurring, or how would that get into the air?
Yes. Hydrogen sulfide itself as a gas in the environment generally is produced by bacteria. We don't have to get too much into the nitty-gritty of it, but when you have a lot of wastewater, you have a lot of that bacteria. And so they're producing the hydrogen sulfide in the water, but more or less, I don't want to say it stays in there, but in general, if the river's moving nice and slow, a lot of the hydrogen sulfide is going to stay absorbed in the water, and you might only get a slight smell. But what's happening is at Saturn Boulevard, there's that kind of difference in height, and the water is spilling over and churning and bubbling out. And when you're doing that, you're allowing all of that gas to escape. And so it becomes this big release of hydrogen sulfide, basically. Does that make sense?
No, that's fair. Like I said, I wasn't sure. 'Cause, you know, some of the conversations tonight were, are there chemicals in the river valley? Are there not chemicals in the river valley? And I just was trying to figure out where it came from. Obviously, I don't know anything about science other than what I hear. So I just wanted to clarify that, so I appreciate that response.
Yeah.
And thank
Could
you.
I add something else, just based on your comment? There's so many parts to this pollution and the wastewater. So there's the hydrogen sulfide gas. There's other gases that are being released from that churning. There's also chemicals that are naturally occurring, chemicals from industrial waste, chemicals from normal human, runoff, right? Then there's also the biological pollution, pathogens, human waste, potential for heavy metals. It's this big, as you guys all know, this big mix of all the hazards, right? And each one kind of requires us to do a different type of sampling and analysis. So that's why sometimes I think our science communication is a bit split, where it's like, we're only talking about hydrogen sulfide here. That's because it was one specific instrument sampling that, and we're working on the data for all the other types that I mentioned. Yeah.
No, I appreciate the additional comments, just because it's hard because we have agencies who think there's no chemicals or nothing that's traceable, and some of the data that's been collected shows contrary to it. So, part of I guess some of the hard parts we've had is just having clear communication of what's happening and the path forward. And so, I think that it continues struggling. Again, everybody has a different opinion, a viewpoint, and stuff that they're looking at specifically. So I appreciate that. Thank you. It was asked a question, what is the cost? Cost to our children, long-term exposure, we don't know yet. I would think that by the time that we have any data that supports that our now governor will probably not be our governor. And I just wonder at some point, what does it really take for people to notice that there's enough data that's been collected? Are we waiting for people to start dropping dead before we believe it? I don't know, and I just continue to be frustrated at the overwhelming lack of response to the crisis here in Imperial Beach, South San Diego, Chula Vista now. When I was a kid, nobody in Chula Vista even knew this happened. Now it's permeating into their areas. And then the other question, somebody mentioned was the river valley not being cleaned out? Great question. Again, historic. Lots of agencies and stakeholders that share property there who, have been part of the studies and everything else, and they continue to lack any action to clean up their part of the river valley. The county, the city of San Diego, some other ones, Fish and Wildlife, those types of things. So, they sign on as support, but I also think that they need to sign on and get some action done. As some of you may know, this council passed a resolution asking Sandag for part of the tolling revenue for the new Otay Mesa 2 East, which would go directly to mitigation of the sewer, which I would hope would include cleaning up the river valley, because it's kind of a mess down there. I mean, I shouldn't say kind of, it's an absolute mess. So, thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Council Member, and without a doubt, we continue to wait for help from our governor and our president. But yes, to your point about the River Valley, there's over 32 agencies with jurisdiction just in the Tijuana River Valley alone. And many of them have jurisdiction over how to dredge and clean and remove invasive species. And in fact, the flooding that happened at the campground, the county campground, was because a tributary from the city of San Diego wasn't dredged for a few years, and it accumulated so much sediment that it broke the berm and flooded all of the area adjacent to it, which is county land. So it gets complicated, that's for sure. Do you want to go? Yeah, Councilmember McKay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had a quick question. relative to the data you guys collected, and it's obvious there are hydrogen sulfide gases there. We know the state minimum threshold is 30 parts per billion. So somebody did a study, somebody understands, you know, at a threshold level, that you can only be in there in an industrial type situation for 8 hours. That's the maximum. We have people who live in that valley full time. My mother lives a mile from the outfall that you talked about. And so there are certainly concerns about elderly people being constantly exposed over time, young children. We heard several people talk about that. I just wanted to tie that back to a bit of information that Dr. Beatty shared about pets. And I, having grown up in Nestor, know there's a huge equestrian population down there. And I'm very curious about if the pets you're talking about included horses. Obviously, a horse has a huge lung capacity, therefore they might even be even more greatly exposed, and even in a shorter period of time. And again, there's multiple horse ranches right there in that same area. So if you could comment just real quickly on whether that was included in your study. Thank you.
Yeah, so we allowed anybody, whatever the animal was, to comment. And some of that information was also gathered during the ACE, so we'll have more data about the types of animals with that.
Does that conclude your questions? Yes. Good question. Councilman, Mayor Pro Tem, do you have any questions?
The air pollution from all the cars was coming over as well, and now we have it from the water. Is it ever going to end?
Can you speak closer into the mic? So that
Oh, hello? There you go. So air, you can't put up a fence, a filter. It will just come across the border. And so now we have more coming across, disturbing the quality of life that we all should be living here with.
Yeah, pollution from cars and other type of air pollution, not just the river, is also something that we're picking up with our instruments, and we've been able to see that in the data, like where a pollution cloud is kind of coming from or going from based on the wind and what's going on. And I don't know where I was going with that, but I'm just saying, yes, like it's not just like the hydrogen sulfide, there's air pollution that we're looking at. Beatrice, do you have something?
I was just going to corroborate that and say that when we are looking into, for example, San Isidro and the communities that are very close to the freeway, we know that also when we do have instruments there, that's also impacted. So when we're thinking about the health of the community, we're also thinking about other reports, other experiences that we know already that clean air is a problem in Southern California for multiple reasons, and we also accumulate that with what's happening in the river as well, unfortunately.
They were testing it at night, and then it was so high that the professor said, "Get out of here." Were you guys the ones?
Yes, but there was a bit of a miscommunication with the media. During that period of time, we had a rental here, and we were sleeping overnight to just be more efficient at taking data and measurements. And then the smell got so bad, at night especially, that we were fortunate enough, we all have our own residence outside of Imperial Beach. So we stopped staying the nights, but we still came every day and took measurements. You know, it wasn't like a complete
And all of us here really appreciate that, because we need that data to prove to various politicians that there is a problem. So I can't thank you enough for coming here, putting your own selves and health in jeopardy to provide this data for us. So thank you.
Yeah, that's our hope. You know, the data is really just a reflection of what you all are experiencing every day. But our hope is that, you know, every piece of data we collect is another drop in the pond that hopefully one day gets big enough that, you know, there's more attention and more funding on this issue.
We're glad you're here.
Can you go back to one of the slides? Do you have the clicker?
If they, can we?
Further back to the chart.
Sorry, which one?
Can you go further back to the chart with the XY graph?
If it'll let me. This one? Next
Further
one?
back. That one.
Yes.
Can you explain what OEHHA is?
Yes. So yes, the dashed lines, the red one is the CARB standard and the green is the OEHHA standard. So there's multiple standards depending on which organization you're looking at for hydrogen sulfide exposure. The OEHHA one in particular is referring to chronic exposure. So 7.3 ppb is the average exposure, the limit for average hydrogen sulfide exposure over a year. So if on average you are being exposed to more than 7.3 ppb of hydrogen sulfide across a year, then they consider that to be chronic exposure that is not safe.
Do they explain what the medical or physiological implications of that long-term chronic exposure are?
They might. The last time I was checking on this, I actually wanted to make sure I gave you guys the right information, and I was reviewing their website before this. It was very scientific, and it just said the chronic exposure limit is here. There's probably more research linked to determining that, but I don't know it right now to tell you.
And I would imagine that chronic exposure exacerbates people who already have underlying conditions like COPD or upper respiratory illnesses or people who are immunocompromised?
Yes, absolutely.
And if I'm reading this correctly, in September, the standard for chronic exposure was 7.3 parts per billion. The CARB, which is the California Air Resources Board standard, is 30. And we had spikes up to 2,000 plus.
Yes, so I know it's really small for everyone, but the far side of the top left, that is September of last year, and our hydrogen sulfide readings, the gray, you can see are extremely high from what we measured. This was close to the river.
And the gray is Nestor, right? The area adjacent to the river. As Marvel, I think, mentioned, there's a number of schools in that vicinity. And then in this lower graph, some days at the coast reached the thresholds, but some days didn't. Is that correct?
Yes, it looks like that. But again, the 7.3 is the average over a full year. So we would need to see this data across a year to know whether it truly passes. But day to day, you do see some days that it goes above, yes.
Is that something that you're going to do? Because that's an area of a lot of interest for our residents, is what are the long-term health effects? And I know, Beatriz, you mentioned that the School of Public Health, SDSU, is looking at a long-term study. Unfortunately, they couldn't be here because of health reasons, but that is an area of interest, of great interest to us. Now, you also commented about the phenomenon that happens with the cascade there at Saturn, right? But my understanding is the city of San Diego put some riprap to make that fall less high. Did you see any improvements after that engineering fix?
Yes. I wish I had some pictures to show you guys. Maybe we can put it on the website or something so you can see, because I took daily pictures throughout this winter of that. From our observation, it seems like the rocks did not help. If you kind of imagine the waterfall, it would pour out and hit those rocks and then just start bouncing between each rock itself. So I don't want to say there was more or less spray, but there was definitely spray because of the rocks. And then this past winter, once we had that first rain event, there was an increased flow in the river, and a lot of the rocks just got pushed away. If you go now, there's kind of like a ring of the rocks around each of the concrete tunnels rather than a pile.
So in your opinion, that cascade or riprap, based on the data that you guys collected, is a source of increased levels of all the chemicals and gases that you guys are measuring?
Yes.
So if that were removed, if the hydrology of the river, if those pipes that are there were removed, the water wouldn't become so turbulent, therefore there may be less. I mean, it's a big assumption, but at least you have data to base it on.
It's possible. Changing the dynamics of the river flow, reducing that waterfall, does not address the issue of those gases being in the water in the first place. So it is possible that those gases would just be released farther down the river, like at the coast in the waves.
In the waves, yeah.
Yeah. I do think it's important to address this waterfall and, mitigate the foaming and the release. But of course, the main issue is the quality of the water.
And that's absolutely true, right? Do you want to add something, Beatriz?
Yeah, just to add something to what you're saying, we know that H2S spikes are being released by that, but as we were saying, H2S is a very easy gas for us to measure, and that's why also, and it's related to the sewage smell, it's a very common tracer indicator for wastewater treatment, wastewater in general, but that might be, there may be other gases as we're looking into, and we're, I hope, soon ready to release the data and see other gases that are there that may not be necessarily caused by that specific foaming as well, that also impact the community. So I think it's very important that we bring H2S data, but also to remember that we have gases that do not smell and that can harm the community as well, that we're looking into.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you go back to one of the one of the slides? One more. There we go. So I see here VOC gases, chemical pollutants, heavy metals. Can you elaborate on what you found? Because we just heard that there weren't any present earlier, but you're finding some that are present. Can you elaborate on what you're finding?
A lot of the, is this on? Okay. A lot of the data surrounding chemical pollutants and VOCs, it's a pretty labor-intensive analysis. And
sorry, can you explain for the public what VOC is?
Yes. VOCs stand for volatile organic compounds. Basically, volatile means that they very easily become gaseous. So that's, when you, I just had some people fixing the patio at my apartment, and then they sealed the door with caulk, and there's that chemically smell coming off of the caulk for a few days now as it dries. That's a VOC, because it's some sort of organic compound that turns into gas. The chemical pollutants, the analysis we're doing looks at a very extremely wide range of them, anything from caffeine, sunscreen, PFAS, drugs like fentanyl and cocaine, byproducts of industrial waste, and more. I'm thinking in my head, the last time I looked at the data, there's like this growing list of very long chemical names of everything we're looking at. But the analysis is not finished yet. When it is, hopefully soon, we will be really excited to share it with you guys. Yeah, that's me.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We have one more question. Go ahead.
Sorry, Mayor, my brain doesn't work fast sometimes. So, again, I don't know anything about science. Is there a way to collect the hydrogen sulfide? Like, could you put a large collector over the river and collect all this stuff as it's turning up? But that, I mean, I'm just saying because, you know, we're going to hear about air purifiers in people's homes. And I'm just wondering, because as the chart shows, this was a thing, again, there may have been lots of other stuff, but it was a huge point, and you saw the spikes. I'm just wondering if there's some type of, again, some type of huge air purifier you could put in there and collect it. I don't know, and then turn it into something great. I don't know.
A giant air purifier would be great, but I don't think there's anything I know of that is feasible for such a large environmental issue, you know. The best thing to do is just clean up the water. Yeah.
We agree with you 100%. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We have to move on because we're almost out of time. Next, we're going to go to 4E, presentation by San Diego County Air Pollution Control District on the air purifiers, rollout, and monitoring of the air sensors. I'd like to invite David Sodeman, Chief of Monitoring and Technical Services, and Anita Lopez, Air Quality Specialist, both with the Air Pollution Control District, to give the presentation.
Thank you. My name is David Sodeman. I'm the Chief of the Monitoring Division at the Air Pollution Control District in San Diego. One of the things that I would like to talk about today is our monitoring efforts, as well as kind of other things that we've done at the Air District. We have a dedicated webpage to address the Tijuana River Valley. This here is the web address, sdapcd.org/TJ-River. It has a broad kind of links to different information. And today what I'll be talking about is the air quality monitoring. We developed a dashboard to provide in near real time the data that we're collecting at 3 monitoring sites. The first one is located at San Diego Fire Station number 29 in San Ysidro, which is by the 5 freeway, at Berry Elementary School in the community of Nestor, and at the Imperial Beach Civic Center / Fire Station in Imperial Beach. The instruments collect 1-minute data that is then averaged into an hour average and transmitted to this website. To get the most current data, you click on the stopwatch in the top right corner, and that takes you to a table with the previous hour as well as the rest of that day data. And that table is updated about 5 to 10 minutes after the conclusion of each hour. This dashboard here that's shown on this screen is data that is collected in the previous day. Every day we take the previous day's data and we upload it to this dashboard. This dashboard is interactive. You can zoom in on the map and really kind of pinpoint where that monitoring location is if you're not unfamiliar with the area. You can translate this dashboard into Spanish by clicking on the Español button. You can remove different sites if you only are interested in one site or a different one. You can uncheck the other 2. You can also, this dashboard defaults to the last 7 days worth of data, but if you want to look at all the data or just one day in particular to kind of really hone in on particular times, you can look on the select by dates, and then that gives a bar that you can then kind of slide and kind of zoom in or zoom out on the data as you choose. So what does the data that we've been collecting show? So when do the previous presentations talked about this CARB standard at 30 parts per billion. So what time of day do we see the concentration of hydrogen sulfide go over 30? This is a histogram. So if you look at the x-axis, the bottom axis, it goes 0 to 23. That represents the hours of the day. And the height of each bar is the number of times in which that particular hour exceeded or was greater than 30 parts per billion. So 0 is the midnight to 1 a.m. time frame, And since we've been collecting, we've noticed that during that hour, 12 times has it been higher than 30. And then the 2 a.m. has been 11 times, and so on and so forth. So one of the things to take away from this slide is that the concentrations are higher at night than during the day. And I think this is something that you guys have all experienced firsthand, that the complaints that we get, that the odors are high at night, they're highest at night, they're most bothersome at night, and not so much during the daytime. So how long do these kind of exceedances above 30 last? You know, are they all night long? Are they just for an hour? Since we've been taking data since, I think it was mid-September, we noticed that most of these exceedances above 30 are less than 1 hour. We've only had a few, I think the 4 and 5 hours, and just most recently, a couple days ago, was a 6-hour event. But these are typically short-term events in the middle of the night. But we have been finding is in the last month or so, I think is when we had the 4, 5, and 6-hour events. So they are starting to become a little bit longer than when we first started monitoring. And with that, I'm going to pass it to my colleague Anita to talk about our AIR program.
Thank you. My name is Anita Lopez, and I'm an air quality specialist helping develop the AIR program. And so many of you know that I think the most immediate relief would have some indoor air filters or air purifiers. And so we have been able to develop a program that allows us to distribute to households that are affected by these odors. And if you can see the map here, it covers all of Imperial Beach, which I think is great to know. Parts of Otay Mesa and parts of San Isidro. So what's important to know is that we do have some funding. We are directed by our governing board to be able to support these efforts. That the county first had a program. We understand that it didn't serve as many. So we have available between 7,000 and 10,000 filters. We've already started this program, and I'm happy to give you an update today. So in this process, we have adopted the county map, and we're able to develop an online portal to make this easier. It's most important to understand that this is not a lottery system, that this is actually something you apply for as long as you're able to prove your residency through a utility bill or some form of a utility bill. It can be an insurance bill, it could be a statement. We don't need any more information than your address and your phone number. We want to make this easy. We made it as easy as possible to be able to process your applications. It is multilingual, so if you want to fill it out in English, it's standard English, or you can use the little drop-down menu to change it to Spanish or any of the other languages, Chinese, Filipino, and I believe there's one more. So it is something that is essentially accessible to anybody in the community. You would just need to scan the QR code today before you leave if you'd like to apply. We have some flyers in the back. And once you enter your information, it will tell you whether or not your address is verified, and then you can continue. If it gives you some reason, like an interest list, I recommend filling that out and continuing with the application. It is a very sensitive application. You need to separate all of your information, your number, your street, from the type of street. For any reason, those kind of errors may send you to an interest list. Please fill it out. We'll fix it for you. But to date, we've been able to distribute 2,494 as of Friday. So we're up to almost 3,000 filters distributed, and we have received up to almost 3,000 applications. Some of which are still needing information. And so we have communicated with anybody that's actually applied in either late 2024 or that is missing a document from 2025. We have already asked for that information. So if you have any questions, we have enough information. Just please to give us an email or a call, and we can answer anything. But it is helpful to know that Imperial Beach is one of the highly served cities that have received essentially 38% of all of the filters. So 1136 is the number of filters that we have distributed in Imperial Beach alone since December. And Otay Mesa, so 92154, we distribute 1,415. We are hoping to reach out to the San Isidro community and our Spanish-speaking community members because most of our applications that we're receiving right now are from this general area and Nestor, and we're not receiving as many in Spanish as we'd like to. So we will be doing some concerted efforts in those communities. But we also know that one of the challenges is that it is technology-based. So if you have any challenges, we have some staff that is available to help answer any questions, and we'll be able to help you with the applications. If you have any questions, this is our contact information. We also have some flyers in the back. So we're hoping that you don't leave here without filling out an application if you're a local resident.
Thank you very much, Anita. We're going to go now to public comment. We're going to start with Leon Benham, followed by Truth, followed by Ramon Chaides.
Go back, please, or where the bar graph that showed the years, and this is a question for Mr. Sodman.
Trying.
Okay.
And we'll wait to address his questions till we're done with public comment. So please proceed with your questions.
Well, it's important that that's there because
That's fine.
As a member of the International Boundary and Water Commission, I look at that, and I was at a meeting with you when you made a presentation on November 8, 2023. And so you at that time, this block in 2023, had still not installed the monitors at Saturn or by Berry Elementary. In fact, many members of the board commented, why don't, you've been doing this since 2017. Don't you know that the smell is coming from this right off Saturn and Leon? And you did not install those until the following year in July. And funny enough that when you started that in September, we had that huge spike and that big spike right when you started. So to not be doing that spot makes really all this data from 2017 when Mexico started the great tsunami of sewage, when Mexico broke the pipe, this data really doesn't show right next to Berry Elementary School. And so that's where our kids are at. That's where our community of Nestor is at. And so this data is not really reflective of what actually was going on at that time. And I was there, and Kevin Bradley and Domingo Vigil, I believe, were there with you, I believe. And so this data kind of shows a false, that actually the reading should be much higher.
Thank you, Mr. Benham. Your time has expired. Thank you. We're going to go now next to Truth, followed by Ramon Chaides.
So only 3,000 applications for purifiers out of about 26,000 residents in IB alone. You don't see an issue with that? Did you ask why don't other people want it? They didn't think it would be worthy of their time, maybe? Because in 4 years of the county board of supervisors, all they've done is a survey and then given out overpriced air purifiers, which are the $500 plus purifiers really better than the $200 plus purifiers? Where's the study to prove their efficacy? The county presentation, even with the glitch earlier, was more well thought out than the purifier program. Let's see. The APCD in general has achieved very little, if anything, but maybe I'm gonna pay it a visit to see if I can help change that in the future. Because pollution control, where is it? Where is it? You guys, you may remember Cesar and Perita Javier. They have said APCD is only good at permits. I'd love for you to prove them wrong. Here's another joke. Do you know what the city of San Diego would have a problem with? The website using the name TJ River instead of Tijuana, as in that's their priorities. They don't achieve much, that's what I'm saying. So I'm thinking there needs to be some kind of reparations for damages, lost property values, lost businesses, jobs, tourism. I'm thinking like a class action lawsuit because Paloma had a couple good points. And one was that the CARB mandates are not being met. Did APCD not recognize that years and years and years ago? Leon was saying 2017. I have a feeling you guys probably knew there was a problem way before that. I can remember when it was a problem way back when in the 90s. Hasn't changed. That's why I care. Thank you.
Thank you. And last will be Ramon Chaires. No? All right. We're going to proceed then to council comments or questions. Councilmember McKay.
First of all, thank you for the presentation. I do want to thank you personally because my mother, who's 87, did receive hers last week. She received her filters first and then her purifier a couple days later, but we got her all set up. She lives in Nestor, so I appreciate that very much. Can you comment, I think the numbers you were showing was there was about 3,000 requests and about 2,500 that had been fulfilled. And what was the total number that you think is going to be available of air purifiers?
Up to 10,000.
Up to 10,000?
Yes, for all areas. So this would include San Isidro, Otay, and parts of that map, and then Imperial Beach as well.
And this is just for residential applicants only, correct?
Correct. This is residential only.
Okay, all right. And one other question. I helped my mom put her request in, because you're right, there is a little bit of a sort of a technology divide between some of the generations. And if I remember correctly, the number you're issued isn't not necessarily your priority number. It's like your personal identification log number.
Yes.
So you might get a low number, but if you're not a senior or have younger children within your family, you might actually have to wait. Well, you will wait until after those individuals have been serviced, correct?
This is correct, yes. So each application, when it's submitted, is automatically assigned a prioritization score, and that's based on how you've answered the questions that are in the application.
Okay.
Do you have children that attend any of the schools? Are you over the age of 65? Are the most important questions. Where your address is located also provides a prioritization. The closer you are to the river provides a few more points. For the most part, I will say this, because I want to respond to receiving the applications, we understand that there's a lot more people that need to be served, right? And we will be having some in-person events very soon. I think that helps, but I also think that getting them direct delivered to your home seems very convenient. So we have been allowing that process for us to track that process before we provide the in-person events, but which we will do soon. I want to also say that when those prioritizations and all of those are met, we prioritize those that have a score of 4 or higher, and it's a total of 9 points that you can get. We have already reviewed every single application we received as of Friday. So we have also issued filters to anybody who had a low priority score because of the number of filters that we applications that we have. So essentially, if you have not received one yet, it's either going to be ordered for you, or you haven't applied for one, or we're missing some information.
Okay. And one last sort of follow-up. You mentioned there's 2 different ways to receive your air purifier. One is to have it delivered directly to your home, and the other is you're going to have like a drop-off or a pickup or a... currently, you're only doing the delivery, home deliveries, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilmember Fisher.
Mayor, I just want to piggyback a little bit off of Councilmember McKay's comments, about the digital divide. With the community efforts, I think outreach is huge. The county, mentioned in his report that there's 17% of the residents who can't leave their home. My concern is that, the demographic that probably fits into both of those are probably our seniors. Are you working with, stuff like Meals on Wheels or PACE and those types of organizations to find out which seniors are out there? Only because, again, I think that Councilmember Kay's mom was, lucky to have him to fill out the application and know where to go. We think everybody's connected digitally and knows what to do, and I'm sure the process is easy. The home delivery is fantastic. I just wonder, what's being done on that end to help our seniors who are the most at risk at this point, along with our children.
Certainly, I think that's where our work is today, is that we are developing those partnerships and we are creating kind of the way that we can partner with them. Given that we're a government agency, we have certain criteria that we have to follow. So we are developing our list and checking it twice and making sure that we can find the right partners that are able to help enroll to reduce the digital divide for home delivery, or help us get the word out so that we know how to serve those families. And we welcome all suggestions. And our email address, filters@sdapcd, would be the best way to provide those to us.
Well, I'll share one with you right now because I'm right here. I think that, is it possible just to get flyers in hands, not so much for help people enroll. I'm just wondering, how do we get the information out? Because, if most seniors, if they don't participate in the internet, most of them always have a phone, a landline of some sort. I'm just wondering if that could be a possibility.
Absolutely.
And then also, are the units energy efficient?
Yes.
Okay, because, I think the concern would be, again, you get these families who are getting these purifiers, running them probably a lot more than they should, just because of, being proactive instead of reactive to some of the smells. And then, of course, utility rates, have been a huge impact over the last couple of years. So I'm just curious, and those types of things. I guess maybe you do know this, maybe you don't, I don't know. You mentioned they are energy efficient. Any idea of what the cost might be to run one?
That I don't have the answer to.
Okay.
I do know that when we put out the bid for the filters, we included all of the CARB regulations, which included the Energy Star efficiency. And we do know that it's not a significant amount of increase, and for certain families that are in apartments, sometimes they're not getting energy bills, so that they're not incurring the cost too. So, and if you are some of the SDG&E programs, they reduce your cost as well. So we are hoping that it's not an added cost to them.
Okay, because that's the thing, we're trying to cure one solution and not having to create another one. So thank you, I appreciate you being here and the work that you're doing, and hope that, very soon that all the units you have for distribution get to the families in need. And again, the extra effort to the seniors is really important, so thank you.
I just wanted to comment that one of the collaborations the county had with APCD was to reach out through using our connections to healthcare providers to ensure people like the elderly and children, families with children, would be, they'd know about this and they could help facilitate them getting their forms and information in.
Fantastic, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, do you have any questions or comments? Okay, there was a late submittal, but I'll allow it. Dee Dee, on comment on this item 4E. Sure, you have 2 minutes.
It'll be a lot shorter. I was raised here in IB, went to school here, Mar Vista High. So, but I live in Chula Vista. My family lives here and in Chula Vista, and they've experienced the horrific smells, and it seeps. My sister, the one I've been texting with right now, asked her any questions if she knew this information you're sharing. Some she did, some she didn't. She has to put like cloths to block the smell from seeping through under the door and the windows. She's going to have surgery here next week just because of all the respiratory issues. But I asked her, did you get your filter? I'm here in IB City Council. She says, actually, I couldn't because they said to put down the account number, and I don't remember seeing one. And I'm asking her, what account number? She says, so annoying. The number they have, they don't answer, and they say call for questions, but they don't answer. So, and she says, and I have surgery on Thursday. So if you could give me a number so that she could directly call you guys. My brother-in-law is always sick. My nephew's 8, she watches the grandkids. They're always sick, asthma, some kind of respiratory issue all the time. So if you could please give us a number. And see, I'm just fortunate that I'm here right now, that I'm going to get a number. I'm feeling that I'm going to get a number. But there's so many other people that are living out there, they don't have a number to call you to get an answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. I wanted to just address, yes, our phone number is a voicemail. However, it's checked nearly every 2 hours, and we do call everybody back within 48 hours. I personally call people back. I take applications. So I think part of it is missing people and passing. So please allow a little grace for us to get back to people, but it is really our intention to serve everybody with the level of customer service that everyone deserves.
Well, I, for one, want to thank all of you, staff, and also the board members at APCD. I know the former chair and one of the APCD board members came down and spent time overnight and experienced the high levels of hydrogen sulfide and had ailments resulting from that. So I do have a few questions relating to the air filters. So you said you may be able to distribute up to 10,000. Is that because that's all the funding that you have allows for?
Yes.
And where did this funding come from?
Excuse me. We were able to utilize some funding through CARB. We got special permission to use some of our funding to augment the program that the county offered.
Because I do think that 10,000, and we're very grateful, right? Because especially it's going to seniors and children, but that it's not enough. Especially we're hearing not just anecdotal reports from Chula Vista, but all the way up to National City. So what can the APCD board do? What can the council do to advocate for more state funding? Because there's an obvious disconnect with the urgency. And we know this isn't the solution, but it's at least something that can bring temporary relief to families here.
I think one of the things that I understand is that, you know, our direct state agency is CARB. They have been very responsive. Those are the people that we at APCD could ask. And we were able to submit a supplemental environmental program application. They were really quick to try and get that program started, which this is CARB money. They gave us additional funding to add to whatever standard AB 617 interest funds that we were using. So I do know that they have been very responsive. They understand this issue. I think at the state level, there's multiple agencies, and I think it's going to take the village to ask for all that money.
Yeah, there's clearly a need for much more. How long is the duration of the life of the filter?
They say about a year, meaning that is in a typical household. I don't think that this is a typical situation, so it's really important that they're used correctly, that windows and doors are closed when using. It can go for 24 hours, 7 days a week. These are quality filters, so we're hoping that they last up to a year, but if it's less than that, every household's getting additional filters to support that. It could potentially, with 3 filters, we would say probably a good 2 years.
And do these only protect against hydrogen sulfide or other types of pollutants?
It's hydrogen sulfide and particulate matter. So it is a carbon filter as well as a potassium permanganate filter.
And what amount of space does it cover? Is it
About
per
700
room or
square
per
feet.
house?
It's 700 square feet, so probably.
700 square feet?
Yeah, it is portable, so you can take it, but it is about one room, you know, a living room or something like that.
And is there a limit of people that can be in the room that it stops working? Like if there's 15 people in one 700 square room, will it stop working?
Not to my knowledge,
Okay.
but I'm not an expert, but I could ask the vendor a little bit more about that.
And lastly, I'm just very curious, you said you filter folks out who are seniors or have children, but what about the immunocompromised?
That one we're not able to ask because we don't have access to personal health information. So that is one of the challenges with our application, is that we cannot accept that information because it's protected information. So our goal is to partner with the health centers and other health-focused programs so that they can then access their own records so that we can serve those families. They can be our partners in outreach and enrollment.
So healthcare providers at health clinics
Sure.
are monitoring people who may report illnesses or ailments or exposure or smells?
We wouldn't access that information. We would just offer to partner and have them enroll so they would know what their patients' issues are
Yes.
and recommend that they apply.
And is that happening already?
That's what we're in the process of.
You're in the
getting,
process
yeah.
of doing that, okay. And then just lastly, relating to the sensors, you pointed out a few of the sensors, but we now know because of the other data that's been collected by some of the universities, is there any plans to move your sensors closer to some of the areas that are considered hotspots?
So we have the three monitors. One is in San Ysidro, one is in Nestor at Berry Elementary School, which is just across the street from where UCSD did their research during the summer, and my understanding, continue to do it, so we're very close in proximity to them. And then our third one is at the Civic Center in Imperial Beach. There are not really current plans to move them around because these instrumentations are not really portable. They require an air-conditioned environment, and trying to move them around is very costly to get power and the appropriate shelters for them.
And lastly, you're only monitoring for hydrogen sulfide, correct?
That is correct.
No other gases
No
that
other
may be
gases.
toxic?
No, we're using hydrogen sulfide as a surrogate for kind of just in general exposure to sewage.
Okay. All right, well, that concludes my questions. Thank you so much. We're going to move to the final item on the agenda, which is item number 5. And I do have two speakers that want to speak to item number 5, Truth and Leon Benham.
I didn't know this was going to happen. I'm really excited. Also, it was interesting because walking over here, I'm like, this has actually been a really long time since I've been back to this school. Very strange. And Jack has previously said that the IB motto is "change is hard." Is that official? Because maybe that's actually the county, state, and federal government's motto for how they view the sewage emergency. Who wants to talk about SB 10, the sewage switcheroo that was instead rewritten to be intentionally vague in order to hijack the future Otay Mesa East border crossing toll money to fund the IBWC to allow more and more pollution instead of cleaning up the Tijuana River. Padilla wants additional sanitation infrastructure and claimed the treatment plants weren't built to capacity. Why is there any capacity at all? I ask it again. And it kind of seems like he was more concerned about landfills than the environmental terrorism going on. And so, Paloma, I was either right that you should have given Lee Zeldin another chance before so quickly dismissing him, or your Pelosi paper terror actually worked. Let's test that theory. I got one. In action on the sewage crisis. How dare you? What a traitor Steve Padilla is. I forgot to show the picture to the camera before I ripped it. Sorry. That's okay. We can edit it in if I make a video. Let's see. I have a bunch of numbers, like I'm supposed to be able to know what I wrote here. Becky, let's talk to Becky. Baja, you said Baja California, we're not looked at as far as funding attention by the government. Guess what? That's something you got in common with Imperial Beach. Congratulations. That's what it feels like to be American. And it sounds like the treatment plant has leftover waste. It's like fallout from a nuclear bomb. I don't know. That kind of came to my mind. It's like, why is there leftover stuff going on? But no one should be getting sick in this area when it's some of the most beautiful land in the county, with a view of another country and different cities, and full with a lot of really great people who deserve environmental justice and health security via a coordinated effort from the responsible or irresponsible entities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Leon Benham.
Well, just in closing, I'd like to say that, you know, there's been a lot of talk about, you know, President Trump's plan in 2019, which rebuilt the pumps that sent all the sewage 10 miles south to SAB, that reestablished the Ronald Reagan Jose de la Madrid agreement that for the Colorado River water, to fund that and to bring it to Tijuana. Mexico agreed to put the pumps in. And brilliantly, the Arcadis group of engineers from Denmark looked at the flows in Tijuana in the river that were, and compared it from 1985, when Tijuana was about 500,000 people, to the current status of 3.1 million people. Obviously, it didn't take a rocket science to replace those pumps. And San Diego State did a study, and if you look, our water quality skyrocketed because all the river water was going down to San Antonio de los Buenos. However, a new project which was associated with Gate 2 at the Otay Mesa border crossing called the for a new superhighway called the Viaduct. And that viaduct plan broke the pipes that carry that sewage down to SAB. And that has been the case since August 2nd, 2022. And there's been no outcry from the city of Imperial Beach, the county. So
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Benham. Thank you. That concludes public comment. We're going to move on to item number 6, City Council discussion regarding Tijuana River pollution and water quality issues. If there's any direction given to staff, I have something. I'd like to propose that we bring back and agendize a letter to CARB to ask for more funding for the air filters, and that we do that in partnership as a sign-on letter with APCD, San Diego, and the county. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be asking for the maximum amount, which in my estimation, it's close to 65,000 households that need these filters, not just 10. But we are appreciative of the 10 that have been made available so far.
I second.
You'll second that? Any additional comments? Any additional comments? All right, well, first and foremost, I want to thank all the participants for showing up and staying for over 2 hours to learn and ask questions. To our panelists, let's hear it for our panelists, guys. Thank you so much. We appreciate the work that you do every day. We appreciate you taking the time to come and help us better understand everything that's happening, and we just appreciate you. So thank you. All right, that concludes our meeting. This meeting is now adjourned.